Going through some old footage because realistically I'm not gonna shoot today just because I have to save all my creative juices for this edit-a-thon that I have coming ahead of me. Couple things. This is all old footage, specifically 2017. This was like the beginning of the dailies. Notice the dress. That's back when I was very, very poor and just grinding for any kind of a dollar that I could get. This is some of my earliest drone footage. In fact, I think this is the day that I got my drone, this one here. And then of course, if you know my brother, he's wearing the classic Bitnam hat in this. But specifically what I was looking through my archive, and I don't think I've ever actually used this footage, and I apologize if I have. But either way, chances are 99.9% of you haven't seen it, and I kind of forgot about it entirely. Throughout my career, I have been approached with a lot of aggressiveness about filming. There is something about a camera, you know, they always say skateboarding is not illegal. Well, filmmaking isn't illegal. I have had somewhat of a checkered past when it comes to trespassing, but usually I know my rights, or I am within a reasonable right. And something that is 100% a part of my right, as much as people don't really want to hear it, it is completely legal for me to stand outside of the road and film your property. If I'm standing on public property, I can film your private property. But regardless, the biggest thing is I never once in my life have ever truly tried to spy on somebody or invade their privacy. For a lot of reasons. One, I'm just not that kind of an a-hole. Two, your life really isn't that interesting. And the only way to make your life interesting is if you're all involved in the content. So if I'm ever filming your property, it's because of something that has nothing to do with you. This is in Greenfield. They have an old factory there that I was very fascinated in. This was the era where I was pretty much exclusively doing videos on New Hampshire's industrial history. And even though I wasn't doing a video on anything specific about that factory, I just saw it and said, hey, this will be great stock footage. Unfortunately, I was approached by somebody that day.
Hi, how are you doing? I'm filming kind of just the factory here. I do videos for Facebook. I'm doing a project where I make a video on something in New Hampshire every single day for a year. So today I was just getting shots around here.
Okay, because we're a government contractor. We're not really okay with like people coming around taking pictures.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You know,
I'm sorry.
I don't know if you're what you've got planned.
Yeah, no,
what
I'm
your affiliations are.
Note that this is a huge thing I always do. I always start off by immediately telling people who I am, what I'm doing, but most importantly, what is the purpose of this video for a project where I do a video on something in New Hampshire every single day. It should be pretty obvious to anybody affiliated with a factory such as that, or really anybody in New Hampshire at all, knowing that these factories carry a tremendous amount of historical significance. So when I do that explanation and she immediately follows it up with, I don't know what your affiliations are, were you not listening?
Because I'm just doing a little history on kind of where New Ipswich came from and that kind of thing, so I'm just getting kind of B-roll.
Okay, have you talked to anybody?
No, I've just been kind of...
It's just a little sketchy.
Now these are those moments where I just sort of have to put on my producer hat, and I know that on most roads, in fact all roads, tend to have a 4 to 6 foot easement that is still considered the shoulder. So it's actually not really your property, even if it's abutting a public road. So here's the road, I was here is the parking lot. She was standing in the parking lot, so I know that I was technically on public property. I'm not gonna argue this with her. However, while she is explaining her, big kind of moment that she's loving, I'm sure, I'm just gonna continue to film because in my head, I'm like, this conversation is about 30 to a minute and a half of potential footage that I could be getting. So you'll notice I'll continue to change angles in film.
Yeah, I'll leave here in a second.
Now, I have a tendency to get extremely passionate and in my own defensive about these kind of interactions. And in no way am I really bashing that woman. She's in her mind doing the right thing. She's trying to protect the ownership of that property, and I certainly respect it. However, it's tough when the thing that they're wanting from me is an explanation, but they're not listening or pushing further for an explanation. Their ultimate gut reaction is, you're doing something wrong and you need to leave. when in reality, I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't have any ill intentions, and I will leave pretty shortly after this conversation's done, because I never, especially with this kind of footage, I'm never there for more than like a minute and a half once I get my equipment set up, which is usually 30-second process.
This was here until I went past it this morning, so
Yeah.
well, I just thought
Yeah.
all right.
Like I said, there's always, I have a heightened level.
No, I understand.
Creeping around the
The
building.
camera definitely encourages the bias, so I understand.
Alright.
So, all right, thank you.
Hopefully you get some good shots.
Thanks.
And obviously there's a decent amount of passive aggression in her voice. And the other thing that people often, not so much in this particular video, but in the past, I've had a lot of people sort of express as if they have a heightened sensitivity to this sort of thing because they've had damaging things happen to them in the past. And I'm in no way to ever deny that somebody has ever had their privacy invaded by someone with a camera. I could never say that. However, chances are it's really unlikely that it has happened to that individual, especially the more aggressive ones. See, I used to sell milk door to door, actually, well, milk service, sort of like the milkman brings milk to your porch. I used to sell that service door to door, so I knocked door to door. And there's sort of a flavor of culture that we have that you see with telemarketers too, where I think it's somebody's invading your privacy, and I think it's a good opportunity for people who are sort of introverted but have sort of an aggression, and this opens the door where they in their head know they're in the right and you're in the wrong, and they feel that power shift, so they'll take advantage of it and they'll really lay into you, you know, because what they're doing is they're projecting all the times they wanted to tell their boss or their wife or their friends or whatever to go pound sand, but now they have this opportunity to, in their mind, commit a victimless verbal assault. Now that's kind of extreme, but as somebody who would take that day in and day out, you start to feel that this is a trend. And the best was always when young people would open the door, especially young men right at that age of puberty, because you could tell they were testing their sense of manhood and their sort of newly realm of sort of masculine aggression. I don't know how else to really put it, but they always were kind of saying things that you could just tell by the body language that they were parroting, things that their father had maybe said. And I think there's a certain level of bragging rights that people get for telling off telemarketers or door salesmen or anything like that, because if you bring this kind of stuff up at parties, it's very similar to how people tend to brag about how fast or how much they speed, how they go over. It's sort of a thing of like, you know, oh, I can't stand when someone's going the speed limit. I have to blow. It's sort of, I don't know how to describe it. It's a weird human phenomenon, and I'm no stranger to it. Maybe not in those subjects, but that's how they see it. It's a story for them to say, oh, I remember this guy came to my door and I told him it's the same thing. I remember one time there was this guy filming on my property and I got out my shotgun and I cocked it, and guess what? He went running. I don't know what that phenomenon is, but I feel it all the time with filming. And whenever I discuss this topic and sort of these frustrations or struggles, one very valid thing always comes up, which is, hey, why don't you just ask for permission first? Boy, do I wish we lived in a world where it was that easy. Especially the nature of how I work. My videos, especially at that time, were so involved and they were within a day. And I just didn't have, when you're doing a video every day, you just don't have the kind of time to be emailing people or to be waiting on a phone call or to get a number. If you ever watched my motel series over this last summer, you can probably see a little bit of a snippet of that. It's just very exhausting to ask for permission. And 9 times out of 10, especially when you're like me and you work very fast and you get everything you need within a 5-minute window, you can just go film and then you leave and no one even ever knew anyone was there. The other problem is because I've been through various phases where I'm very interested in doing videos on businesses for the sole purpose of that if I find them to be a staple in New Hampshire, like a Hayward's ice cream or, you know, something along those lines, those businesses always give me the biggest pushback, even though to you and I, your initial thinking might be that, well, it's free advertising, which is, yeah, that's a bonus. That's certainly not why I'm doing it. There's no strings attached. And it's gotten to the point where my sort of sales pitch has always been, I am not asking for money. I am not doing this for money. This is simply a personal passion project of mine. And then I go in. But even when you do it up top, and especially if you say you're not asking for money, the skepticism is just insane. But if I just go in there and I act like, you know, I'm just like, hey, like I'm vlogging or whatever, and I have a little camera, it's less ridiculous. However, as a man with some, do I say artistic integrity? No. As someone with a bunch of cameras that are big, when you go in there with a professional looking setup, they immediately think you're doing it for money, it's some sort of gotcha journalism, you're trying to, you know, as if anyone's ever doing gotcha journalism on the Red Arrow, you know what I'm saying? I mean, this is New Hampshire, chill out. And I obviously have a lot of kind of bias frustrations with this just because I've dealt with it, but as I've grown through my career and as I've continued to do dailies and more of this guerrilla kind of style of filmmaking, I've learned to not blame anybody for it. I get it, they're just not ready for it. Some people just get nervous around cameras. They get very nervous being on camera, so their sort of initial reaction is kind of that defense mechanism of like, what are you doing? And I get that. Unfortunately, cameras to most of the population feel like an invasion of privacy. And I'm not here to fight that. I just hope that as generations go on, because you already see it with the younger generation, they love to be on camera. They love to talk to the camera, and you can chalk it up to narcissism all you want, but I think truly what it is just kind of they're just around them more. And interestingly enough, the opposite side of the spectrum, old people also love to be on camera because they see a camera and they think, oh, this is my big moment. I'm gonna be on the news. You know, nothing's better to them. But there's sort of that weird kind of generational era where I think it's, I don't know what it would be, maybe the late 90s, early thousands, where I don't know if a bunch of camera crimes happened, but people who seem to grow up, you know, be older through those generations just have more of a skepticism of cameras. So I at some point, and probably deep in my files, I have more of this kind of stuff. But back in the day when I got this, I used to delete my footage every day because I don't know, I thought it was more artistic, or I don't know, it's cringy because I wish I had a lot of that raw footage now. But this has just happened to be one that I found that I had saved. So it's kind of one of the few examples. And I usually try not to include it because it's just sort of a negative tone, and usually I'm trying not to be super negative in my you know, videos that I'm actually trying to make, not like the throwaway dailies. All right, well, I hope if nothing else, that was just a enlightenment on my perspective of going up and telling people to F off when they have a camera. Because chances are they're not doing anything bad. They're just trying to make a couple dailies, dude. Maybe they're making, you know, just YouTube, whatever. See it all the time.